Welcome to Whiskey's a Journey. My name is Peter Fasciano, and today's Monday, which means it's going to be another one of my series in my peated Scotch whiskeys. Today we're taking a look at Springbank 12 Cask Strength, coming in at 54% ABV, 54.1% ABV. Natural color, non-chill filtered, and the cask maturation in this is going to be 60% bourbon and 40% sherry. I got a 700 milliliter bottle, and in Phoenix, Arizona, Trevor's to be exact, I paid $134.99. Let's go ahead and pour this, nose it, taste it, talk about it a little bit. And then if you stick around until the end, I'm gonna give it a score. Looks like a little bit of a healthy pour there. I tell you what, even before I get this thing up to my nose, I'm getting some vanilla and sherry, and the ABV smells pretty good. It's pretty strong. I'm getting a lot of malt already. All right, let's get this thing on the nose, and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, that's unfortunate. I do get a slight amount of sulfur. Not a lot, but there is a small tinge of sulfur. Slight amount of peat, good amount of sherry. And I think the bourbon cask influence in here is also showing through with that vanilla note. Small amount of spice, but that also could be the ABV. Since it is 54.1% ABV, I might be getting a little sting to the nose that resembles spice, but it could be masked as ABV. Springbank peat to me is very subtle, and it's smack dab in the middle of campfire ash and sweet, savory, meaty, like smoked meats, right in between. I wouldn't say it is completely ashy, and it's definitely not completely savory, but I don't get any Band-Aid iodine tarry notes out of here. But there is a little bit of a wet cardboard, funky note to it that might be that Springbank funk that people talk about, but I'm hit and miss on that. Sometimes I get it a lot, and sometimes I don't get anything at all. But right now, maybe that mixture of sulfur, peat, and cardboard is coming across as maybe that Springbank funk. If you do get Springbank funk, how would you describe it instead of just saying that it's funky? It might sound a little bit off-putting, but it has almost like a stinky cheese quality as well. Just smells like decaying leaves, the outside, a little bit of a sourness smell. It's not bad, so don't like think that those notes that I'm saying are off-putting, because they're not. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing on the palate and see if the nose matches the palate. Right up front, I get hit with that ABV. There's a good amount of vanilla, the malt, a little bit of barrel bitterness on the side of the tongue, but it's nothing that is too overpowering. That funky cheese or that outside decaying leaves and wet cardboard, damp basement, or like a musty attic, all of that is coming through, and it tastes really good. And I think those bourbon and sherry notes play off of one another really well. Now, I do need to say that this is the bottling of 3/4/23. So I don't know if that is March 4th or if that is April 3rd. I'm not positive. The code on the bottle, that's what it says. It says 3/4/23. And I know sometimes European bottles, they flip-flop the month and the day. So let me know in the comments down below. Is 3/4/23 March or April? And also, please let me know, because I'm not exactly positive. This Cask Strength release, I think, is limited, and they don't always do the 60% bourbon and 40% sherry. I think they experiment a little bit with different ratios. I could be completely wrong, but if you know, let me know in the comments down below. The sulfur note that I had on the nose is not there on the palate whatsoever. So I wonder if that was just one of those fleeting things that I got right at the beginning. That was the first sip. Let's get the second sip down, see if anything changes. I'll concentrate on the finish and see if I can pull anything else out of this before I add water to it and talk a little bit about Springbank. Malty, ABV, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of saltiness is there. On that second sip, I'm even getting less peat than I did on the first one. The vanilla and the red fruit notes are still there, just like it did at the very beginning. Doesn't seem to be developing anything. that first and second sip were pretty close in profile. As far as the finish goes, I would say that it is medium to long. That ABV sticks around, that vanilla note, the sweetness, the malt, all of it plays off of one another pretty good. I would say it's rather well-rounded, but I wouldn't say that it has a lot of depth, not like some of the other Springbanks that I've had. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of water. I think the Cask Strength is going to hold up to the water rather well. Add a little bit of a tongue twister there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Springbank and some of their offerings, and then we'll go ahead and give this one last nose, a taste, and then jump on to the score. So Springbank was founded in 1828 by William Reed. Prior to the Springbank distillery being built, there was an illicit still that was on that same piece of property that apparently was being run by Archibald Mitchell. And apparently William Reed ran into some financial difficulties and eventually sold to Archibald's sons, William and John, in 1837. And just a side note, and I still think this is pretty much the case, Springbank was one of the very few distilleries that did their own malting, did their own bottling, and did their own distilling all on the same property. At some point during their history, I think they stopped, but if I'm correct in this, I think they are doing all of that on their own again. The malting, the bottling, and the distilling. Not necessarily in that order. And then, just like always, in the 1920s, financial hardship and I think global hardship started to cause the whiskey business to drop off a little bit. Springbank was not immune to that as well, and they ended up closing in 1926, but quickly reopened in 1934. And during that time of the shutdown, I think they still had stocks available and they continued to sell their whiskey. And based on the notes that I have, everything was pretty good up until 1979, where the distillery was mothballed. But prior to it being mothballed, they started to distill one of their other expressions, that was the long row. Long row was distilled in 1973, but mothballing the distillery prevented them from selling the long row, but they had enough stocks in reserve that they ended up selling throughout the point of the mothballing. And then in 1987, they reopened. Jump ahead another 10 years, 1997, they started to distill Hazelburn, and Hazelburn is the offering that they have that is non-peated, but I have a Hazelburn and I still do get a little bit of peat, and I think what they end up doing is during their distilling seasons, they start out with Hazelburn, which is their non-peated. They clean everything up and then they distill Springbank, and then they clean everything up again, and then they start doing the Hazelburn or the long row, which was their heavily peated. And because of that whole process, when they have 3 distillation periods, I think the Hazelburn still picks up a little bit of that malted note that might be lingering around in the distilling process, or the malting process, or the drying process of the malt. So there you go, a little bit of history, a little bit of information on Springbank. If there's any information that you would like to share to the public that's reading these comments, let me know in the comments down below. Just go ahead and post them there. All right, now that this had a little bit of time to sit in the glass, let's go ahead and give it one last nose, one last taste, and we'll jump to the score. All right, I get a little bit of a cinnamon note now that is jumping out of the glass, and maybe that cinnamon note may have been mistaken as the sulfur note at the very, very beginning. There is a little bit of a tang or a tinge or a bitterness to that note. All of the malt is still there. Vanilla and red fruits. Almost a little bit of a berry note. I wouldn't say that there's raisins, dates, figs, and plums like sometimes sherry can come across that way. I don't get any of that in here. Adding the water did change the profile a little bit, but not too much that I would actually say that that changed it completely. So let's go ahead and get it on the palate. See if anything changed there. Adding the water definitely brought out a little bit more spice. There's a ginger and pepper note that's coming through. Vanilla, malt, all of that's still there. Again, just like that second sip, from the first sip, and then after adding the water, I don't feel like much has changed, and the flavor profiles stayed pretty much consistent, and that's what I'm trying to get at. This doesn't seem to be developing or unfolding any new notes as I'm going. And because of that, I think this lacks just, a little bit of depth. something that I was expecting this would actually have. And because of that, I think it's gonna knock down the score just a little bit. So if you are new to this channel, my scoring system is out of 5 stars, and I've done multiple series, and I can't compare this to an American single malt or a Japanese whiskey or an Irish. So all of my scores are going to be based off of this current Monday series on the peated scotches. Because of the lack of depth, it's not developing into anything, even though the flavors are pretty strong and pronounced with the vanilla and the sherry. Those sweeter notes are balanced pretty well with that spice that I'm getting with the ginger and the pepper. Since I'm a little bit further along in my journey, I'm starting to like the higher ABVs, and adding water to this didn't really harm the spice or the ABV feel that I'm getting. So that doesn't hurt it at all. But I keep falling back to the lack of depth that I was expecting to get in here. The notes stayed pretty consistent from my first, second, adding the water, and the third sip. So with all of that, I am going to put this one right at 3.85. As far as a Springbank goes, I don't think this is going to wow anybody. Actually, I need to take that back. I have no idea if it's going to wow anybody. This could be somebody's best whiskey that they've ever had in their life. So let me backtrack on that. It's not wowing me. How is that? It's not wowing me. So I'm going to keep this right at 3.85. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of Springbank. If you have a cask strength version, let me know if it's still that 60% bourbon, 40% sherry, or if it's different. And let me know the year of your bottle. That's all I got for you today. Wherever you're at in your journey, I hope you are enjoying it. And until the next time, I'm going to be taking a look at Talisker 10. So if you are not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Do all those things that YouTubers ask you to do, and turn on that bell notification, because I shoot videos and release them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Cheers, everybody. We'll talk to you later.